Hello and good morning, everyone. On behalf of Edelgive Foundation and Chase India, I extend a warm welcome to all of you. Thank you for taking out time to join us for the launch of Landscape Study on Women Entrepreneurship under the Udyam 3 campaign. Today, we will discuss how India can steer the Atmanirbhar Bharat vision by leveraging the untapped potential and role of women's entrepreneurial spirit. We have with us today Mr. Amitabh Kant, CEO of Niti Aayog, presiding over today's event as the chairperson. And we have with us Mr. Mohan Mishra, Secretary of Ministry of Women and Child Development, as our chief guest of the event. Hello. Before we kick off the event, to ensure that we get the best out of today's discussion in the limited time that we have of everyone present here, I would like to lay down a few guidelines. All attendees are requested to please switch to the live feed mode in Zoom. We have dropped some instructions in the chat box for your reference. Also, we would like to make this an interactive conversation. So please feel free to use the chat box to drop your questions or comments to our moderator once we begin our panel discussions. With this, I would like to welcome Ms. Nagma Mullah, CEO of Edelgive Foundation, who will speak about the Udyam 3 campaign and the launch of this landscape study on women entrepreneurship. Over the past 9 years, Nagma has been driving large-scale innovative programs of social change at the foundation and has been an enabler of several commitments to the foundation's diverse portfolio of NGOs by creating valuable partnerships with the international as well as national level stakeholders in this sector. So over to you, Nagma.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Good morning on behalf of Edelgive Foundation, and our deepest gratitude to all of you for being part of this very, very special event. For many years now, Edelgive has been working with the focus of enabling gender-inclusive societies through quality education of children, empowerment of women, and building resilient livelihoods. And one of our key learnings has been that a fundamental way to approach economic upliftment of women is to promote entrepreneurship. I'm very aware of Mr. Kant's limited time with us, and I will get down really into this landscape study and to invite him. But the idea of the landscape study was really that we needed a bedrock, we needed to launch a campaign which aimed at working with stakeholders from across sectors like funders, corporates, and peoples of influence to work in collaboration and to further strengthen the ecosystem for potential and existing women entrepreneurs. The landscape study on women entrepreneurship is our humble attempt to understand the existing space for women entrepreneurs, different aspects of their journey, challenges, obstacles, and gaps. And these findings aim to chart out a way for all diverse stakeholders to design strategy and inclusive interventions together. I would like to thank you all once again to come and join us for this event, and take this opportunity to welcome and introduce the chairperson of this event, Mr. Amitabh Kant, CEO, Niti Aayog. Mr. Kant is known to everyone. He is one of the most senior and dynamic bureaucrats that we have had, and he has had an illustrious and impactful career for over 4 decades. He has been a key driver of some of the most popular and significant policy initiatives: Make in India, Startup India, Incredible India, God's Own Country, initiatives that positioned India and the state of Kerala as leading manufacturing and tourist destinations. He was also the National Project Director of the Rural Tourism Project of UNDP, which made a paradigm shift in spreading tourism to Indian villages, which had core competency in handicrafts, handloom, and culture. In his capacity as Secretary, Industries, Government of India, Mr. Kant drove the Ease of Doing Business initiative and ranking of states on outcome parameters. Furthermore, he is also the author of Branding India, an incredible story. We were delighted when Mr. Kant agreed to write the foreword of this landscape report, which is an incredible validation of a humble effort of ours. With Mr. Kant, we are really honored to have you chair this event, and I would request you to please address the audience.
Please. Ladies and gentlemen, my distinguished colleague, the Secretary for Women and Child Development, Mr. Mishra, I'm truly delighted to address you here at the launch of the landscape study on women entrepreneurship. Financial independence plays a very critical and a key role in enhancing the agency and empowerment of women in society. Entrepreneurship provides women a route to financial independence and is thus a very, very powerful tool for addressing gender inequalities and effecting greater social change. If you look at the sixth economic census, women constituted only 13.76% of the total entrepreneurs in the country. That is 8.05 million out of the 58.5 million entrepreneurs in the country. But those 8.05 million enterprises provided employment for close to 13.45 million people. In a country like India, where women workforce participation is closely linked with entrepreneurship, self-employment and small and micro businesses contribute significantly to job creation. Evidence shows that women-led enterprises have a tendency to hire more women, and hence women's entrepreneurship creates a huge multiplier effect in generating employment opportunities for other women in a wider community. Entrepreneurship is thus a catalyst for socio-economic transformation, advancing the women empowerment of the economic empowerment of women and enhancing women's agency and status through the ownership of assets and the freedom of decision making. Thus, the vision of a truly Atmanirbhar Bharat, as envisaged by the Prime Minister, would only be possible with greater participation of women-led enterprises. If you look at the 2020 MasterCard Index of Women Entrepreneurs, India ranked 49 among the 58 ranked countries, having improved its ranking by 3 positions compared to its 2019 position. However, in the World Economic Forum's Gender Gap Report 2021, India's ranked 140 out of 156 countries, having slipped 28 places. The global benchmarks indicate that there is a lot of groundwork which is yet to be covered, both in terms of enhancing support for women entrepreneurs as well as bridging the gender gap. McKinsey's Gender Parity 2018 report noted that if we are able to address gender inequality, we would potentially add about 770 billion to the GDP. Addressing the gender gap is thus an opportunity which we cannot afford to miss. But there is a lot of ground that remains to be covered. Women continue to face unique challenges relating to gender discrimination and unconscious gender bias, household responsibilities and childcare, access to finance. Indian women often do not own property and financiers are biased, perceiving women as high risk, and workplace safety. But unlike before, these challenges are now openly being discussed, debated, and brought to the forefront of public consciousness and discourse, paving the way for change. This is why studies such as the landscape study that the Edelgive Foundation has conducted are so critical and important, not only to understand the limitations specific to entrepreneurship, but to glean a better understanding of the underlying socio-economic issues and nuances. In order for us to change and transform the narrative around women entrepreneurship, we have to dive deep into the specific issues. We have to check the pulse on the ground more frequently and make adjustments to the government's offering in order to improve service delivery. Ladies and gentlemen, there are insights which can greatly help tweak the designs of schemes and service delivery. For example, programs can be designed to better support married women and their access to credit. Schemes can provide women entrepreneurs with mobile phones and appropriate training to help them take their business online and to build a credit history. And greater outreach for government programs would have to be conducted to enhance reach to beneficiaries. The key challenges faced by women entrepreneurs had already been recognized in Niti Aayog's strategy at 75. However, one thing is certain, that in order for us to transform women entrepreneurship ecosystem, the government cannot do it alone. It would require great cooperation between public and private sector. And understanding this, we launched the Women Entrepreneurship platform in 2018. The web caters to both established as well as aspiring women entrepreneurs through its 3 guiding pillars: Ichha Shakti, to motivate aspiring entrepreneurs to kickstart their enterprise; Gyan Shakti, to provide knowledge and eco-support system; and Karma Shakti, to provide hands-on support in launching and scaling ventures. The platform follows clearly defined objectives to fill the vision with which it was developed. It enables collaboration among peers. It addresses information asymmetry through a dynamic knowledge portal. It offers capacity building programs to enable scalability and sustainability, and it creates role models by recognizing exceptional women change makers across India. At present, the platform caters to a vast segment of women, both in urban areas as well as Tier 2, Tier 3 cities, and self-help groups both in the online as well as in the offline mode. I'm confident that the government and the private sector partners engaged through initiatives such as the web will realize this vision of Atmanirbhar Bharat, where men and women have an equal role in the households as breadwinners and can share equal glory as architects of a bold new India. I would like to congratulate Mrs. Vidya Shah, Executive Chairperson, and Ms. Nagma Mullah, the CEO, and the entire Edelgift Foundation team for undertaking this very critical and important study. I hope you and your team will join and support all of us in Niti Aayog in transforming the women entrepreneurship ecosystem. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very, very much, Mr. Kant. Thank you. We really, really appreciate your joining us, enlightening us with these very warm words, and we look forward to more interaction with you. Deeply that you had an urgent meeting, but you have taken out time for us. So from the entire Edelgift team and everyone present, thank you very much. It now gives me immense pleasure to welcome and introduce you to the chief guest for this event, Mr. Ram Mohan Mishra. Mr. Mishra is currently serving as a Secretary of Ministry of Women and Child Development. And prior to this, he was a Secretary of the National Commission for Scheduled Castes, Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment. A 1987 batch IAS officer of Meghalaya cadre, he has over 30 years of experience as an Indian Administrative Service Officer. And in the past, he has worked as Development Commissioner in Ministry of MSME, where he was accoladed for an action-oriented approach and was responsible for a number of tangible benefits for the MSME sector in the country. We are so thankful that you accepted our invitation to be the chief guest and launch this landscape study for our event. We are also so delighted that you are here with us, Mr. Mishra. We completely appreciate the time you have taken out and joined us. I would like you to please address the audience, sir.
Thank you, Ms. Mullah. At the outset, I congratulate your chairperson, you and the entire Edelberg team for having this very, very important step of studying the landscape of women entrepreneurship. Because until unless we are clear about the landscape, whatever we try to do will not be many times focused and meaningful. And therefore, I also express my gratitude to you, because being in the Ministry of Women and Child, it is part of my responsibility to see that everything which is needed to be done for women to be empowered is actually done. And therefore, this knowledge creation, I am sure will go a long way in terms of fortifying what you are already there as knowledge input for helping women grow to in their potential. Now, having said this, there's an old belief that sa vidyaya vimuktaye. So only that knowledge is meaningful, only that knowledge is fruitful, which liberates. And this knowledge of entrepreneurship, if it doesn't lead to enterprising being established, and as Mr. Amitabh Kant was so aptly mentioning, there's so much potential which is yet to be harnessed in the country in the realm of labor force participation, in the name of women entrepreneurship. And therefore, it's important for us to see to it that this knowledge which has been created, coupled with all other knowledge which is already existing, that can be done very easily with the help of data triangulation, with the help of collaborative research. And this entire body of knowledge, Vidya as we call it, is put into action. And when we're talking about action, action also has to be in the landscape mode. Because many times, there's a lot of action, but then the action is many times in silo. And when the action is in silo, it doesn't produce that holistic result which is supposed to be produced. And talking about entrepreneurship, Mr. Kant has mentioned already some limiting factors which inhibit women or which constrain women on the path of entrepreneurship. These, out of my experience, I've seen these can be grouped into the following. One is the first of thing is to break this mental barrier. Many times, traditionally, we get convinced and we are told again and again, no, no, this is not for you. And particularly in a patriarchal kind of society, it has been our experience that the certain things right from childhood are ingrained in the mind of a child, and particularly girl child. No, no, you are for this. So it starts with toys. So there are certain toys which are for boys, there are certain toys which are for girls. This is where it begins. And then as we move along, नहीं बच्चियों को जरा लड़कियों को होम साइंस पढ़ाओ और उनको स्वेटर बुनना सिखाओ. Not that it's bad. No profession is bad. No karma is bad. Nothing is bad. But then to create that intrinsic inherent bias right from beginning, which becomes very limiting as we move along. So if we take note of the actionable part of this, actions are at the societal level, first of all. Because as a society, if we are harboring certain attitudes, then that impacts children, that impacts women right from childhood days. And therefore, there is a lot of work which is needed on the societal level to break those barriers, to break those behavioral patterns. So we have this program called Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao. This is where we make some humble effort to bring that behavioral shift in the mindscape of people, to ensure that this discrimination which gets inbuilt right from childhood of a person, that no, this is not for you. And moving on, it has been the practice that when the girl is growing into the adolescence and all that, people start planning, ye to beti दूसरे घर की हमारी बेटी दूसरे घर की है, वो तो पराया धन है हमारे पास, हम तो इसकी कस्टोडियन है, फिर तो इसको दूसरे घर में जाना है. So though we have tweaked those succession laws, but on ground, if you see, a lot more work is needed to be done to translate that succession part into action, where the properties, particularly the fixed assets, are actually inherited by women. Because the entire issue of security, mortgage, when you are trying to access the capital, it will not be there if this entire social bias is there. No, this should be only with the boys, not with the girls. And then when you go to this other family after marriage, because in this patriarchal system, then the girls have to travel. Now, of course, in bigger cities, there is nothing like this. Nobody travels anywhere. Both are traveling together wherever they go. But then larger segment of society, this continues to be reality that you have to go to another place. Then the challenge of establishing yourself there, and then there also most of the time, you end up not inheriting anything in terms of fixed assets. Now, that becomes a very big constraining factor. And when we talk about access to capital, you talk about access to finance. This is a backlog which carries that. And therefore, when we're designing products, when we're designing policy, when we're designing products, the financial products, we have to factor in this element that there's certain inbuilt constraint for women, not to have certain security. And therefore, then we have to visualize when we talk about access to finance. We need to visualize guarantee products and counter guarantee products, then insurance products on top of guarantee products and so forth. So therefore, the risk, which is intrinsically perceived by a banker or a venture capitalist in terms of granting access to women for the capital which is supposed to be given, that risk can be mitigated to the extent it is required. And so first is to pick up the courage, to get motivated to set up an enterprise. So because if any intelligent human being, if you become conscious of these constraining factors around, then that also impacts your inspiration. That impacts your motivation, because you are aware, very much conscious that these are the binding factors around. So even if I get motivated, there are so many things ahead of us which are in terms of barrier. So that is the first thing. And this is where those small videos, short films, in my own job as DC MSME, I came across women who've done fabulous work as entrepreneurs, fabulous, fantastic work. in spite of all the constraints I was talking about. So there are success stories. So the first step for us as a nation is to share those success stories of women from different backgrounds, from different landscapes. The women are like this. One woman I came across was she suffered a lot. She got married early, then husband was not a very nice person, and then she was moved out of family, and then she struggled a lot, and then she set up a multi-million enterprise in due course. Very inspiring. So this is not the only one. There's so many success stories. So when we talk about Uddam Stree, it's a great initiative. But then these threes who have done great work in the field of entrepreneurship, particularly the ones who has unshackled themselves by themselves. They did not get much of outside help, but they unshackled themselves. So if those stories can be brought to life, they could be broadcast. They could be shared through WhatsApp or social media or whatever. So that is where the journey begins. Journey begins in the dream. I too dare to dream, because there's some people in the similar position that dared to dream and they succeeded. So why not me? So the moment this idea occurs, that idea of success, as it is called, the moment it happens, then the next step is, then she'll ask questions. No, I'm encouraged to do it. But what is that I should do? I'm a first generation entrepreneur. So those questions are there. So we need to carefully list down all those questions. So what to do, which business to do, which enterprise to set up, then where is the market for the product, then where get the finance, where some labor will come, what are the skills? There are those standard questions which need to be answered. That is the only thing is going to convince the woman, these questions have been answered. And then, so this is what I was saying, Savidya Vimuktave, because this knowledge not only written in the book, because it is also said in our tradition that Pustakastha Tuyavidya Parahastagatam Dhanam Apatti Kale Samapanne Nasa Vidya Natad Dhanam. For those who don't follow Sanskrit, I'll just translate. Whatever is written in the book, that is one. Second is money which has been handed out to somebody else. These two things, when the times are difficult, both of these things don't work. And therefore, this has to be a book which is alive. And you and your chairperson, Mr. Mullah, Ms. Mullah, and your chairperson, and your entire team, I have become aware that you have done wonderful work. So moving on, if you can become a point of coalescence. But there are a lot of people I come across in this nation who want to bring out a helping hand for the cause of women. But then many of these things are still standalone and in silos. Most of the chambers of commerce and industry associations I came across, there are a lot of wonderful people who want to do wonderful things to make wonderful contribution to the life of women, particularly entrepreneurs. But this needs to be aggregated somewhere at some point in time. And therefore, this knowledge has to be in action. And knowledge has to be just like a hub, actually, it has to be created from. And then with those spokes. So it has to be kind of grid where knowledge is there, but there are those people just to hand the hold. Just like on we see that poster called Footprints on the Sands of Time, where if you are about to fall, or if you're just fallen, there's some fallback position. Somebody is there. Once that assurance comes, once that confidence comes, that come on, even if I fall, so what? There's somebody to handle, somebody to hold. Just like in the circus, they do this acrobatics, but the nets are there. And therefore, this social security, this social net of entrepreneurs, when they are facing risk, there are people who are going to handhold. Handhold in terms of what? They may not need money, but they need knowledge which works. And who knows the knowledge which works? So this is where the people who have done business, who are doing business, and who are capable of doing business, they don't know how to handle difficult situations. And this grid of people, this grid of persons who are there available just to attend to a phone call of 3 minutes or 5 minutes, this can make a humongous contribution to the life of women entrepreneurs. Because This is not from a book, but this is like a kind of navigation system. And so this knowledge has to come out as if it is coming from a navigation system. And so this knowledge, there are several aspects of it. Once the knowledge is made available, skilling of particular kind for management skills and so forth, and particularly the knowledge of what not to do is important. That comes only from experience. And then we should talk about finance. And then finance for women is not just loan. It has to be products which are hybrid, design composite products, which are risk capital, which are insurance products, which are guarantee products, which are counter guarantee products, which are then debt. We talk about debt. Because debt alone is not going to be enough. And then there are issues of technology. Technology which is the appropriate kind, technology which is the right kind. Then there are issues of access to logistics, access to infrastructure, and particularly I would like to mention in working spaces, whether these are offices or these are enterprise offices or whatever, it's important that we have access to toilets which are in right condition. That's a very, very limiting factor I have seen. Toilets which are available in these workspaces, and then you need access to co-working spaces, particularly first generation entrepreneurs, because I may not have money to set up an office of my own. And therefore, I've seen some very good experiments like Keynote place. There used to be an office called Innovate. And I visited them once. Like that in country, a lot of such things have come up where you can just hire a space and then with a small little amount of money and then you're fine. And then the most important thing, and that is access to market. Because if you have done everything on the path of entrepreneurship, but if you cannot sell your product, then it is time, I won't say wasted time, but it is not very well deployed time. So therefore, when entrepreneurship question comes, whether to be an entrepreneur or not, then the first question is, what I am conceiving as a product? Is there a possibility to sell? Many times my experience has been, people in their enthusiasm to set up business, and the people are trying to help them in their enthusiasm to help them, just give them some loan. Without trying to find out as to, out of this loan, what your product is going to be rolled out. Is there a market? And then the market, there are related questions. What kind of packaging? What kind of design of the product? What kind of transportation system has to be made available? Whether the cold chain is there or not? And so on and so forth. There are several questions. And even after that has been sorted out, there are issues of governance. You set up a limited liability partnership firm, but there are those compliances. And I did not do chartered accountancy, so it's a problem for me. So is there somebody who can guide me? Are there some online courses which I can attend, some 6, 7, 8 videos, which can help me sail through? So these are the kind of 7 types of issues, 7 types of issues which women or any other entrepreneur faces, particularly women. And therefore, if the help is available in respect to the 7 on the path of entrepreneurship, then Savidyaya Vimuktave, then the liberation from not being an entrepreneur. Though I hold the potential, but I could not become an entrepreneur because those things were shackling me. Those things were constraining me. So this report, this landscape study, I think is a wonderfully designed theme and title, because many times we get very deep into one aspect of the problem. But until unless you take a kind of overall ecosystem view, then the solutions are not found. Solutions lie in the ecosystem. Solutions can never be out of silos. So I congratulate you for having this very holistic kind of view about entrepreneurship. And moving on, I think apart from the challenges, there are some very, very exciting opportunities, because in India, a lot of possibilities are very clearly visible. We on our part have now dedicated a mission called Mission Shakti. And this is about overarching support to women in terms of social, cultural, political, and economic empowerment. All these are also interrelated. Social, cultural, political, and economic empowerment, they're all interrelated. And so this Mission Shakti is there. It has 2 aspects of it. One is that women need some bit of support. They do not need, they would not have needed that support, but for that history of patriarchy, so that patriarchal kind of backlog which we hold. Otherwise, their name itself is Shakti. Their name itself is power. But now they need support in terms of certain factors, because of historical reasons, there are certain constraints they are there. So this is one part of it. Second is, as a nation, if 50% of the population, 50% of the human capital, we are not fully making use of, then I would only say it's not very intelligent. Because the 50% of human capital, and that too, as in common parlance it is said, 50% it is not just 50, it's a better half 50%, better 50%. You're not making full use, no, it's not very intelligent. So it's a drag on growth, it's a drag on economy, drag on development, and drag on everything. So therefore, moving on, I think a lot of exciting times in this particular field. And we in the Mission Shakti kind of thing, it's a partnership project, it's a people's project, it's your project, it's everybody's project. And just to harness the power of Shakti, the woman is Shakti. And then certain things which are special about women, which only they can do. Like say, if you say men can do everything, but can a man be a mother? It cannot be. There are certain things can be done only by a mother. And so therefore, when we design products and services as a society, as a nation, even if you simply look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, so those needs are to be fulfilled. That's the marketplace. That's the field of entrepreneurship. And so there were the certain aspects of life. Those they can be, this is my belief, can be much better nurtured and filled by women. And one thing which has been also constraining them is the physical working kind of system. So they are constrained, and the child is there to be taken care of and all that. So how to go to 10 to 6 in office, and then how do you balance all this? So gig economy. And therefore, this last 1 year has been very difficult for us, but it also has taught us to work from wherever we are. And this is a very, very special opportunity for women to kind of start becoming entrepreneurial or start working from wherever they are. So moving on, I think the them three can also focus on these emerging opportunities. There are many more things, but I think in a limited time, I have tried to share some of my thoughts on this. It's a wonderful initiative. I compliment all of you once again for having taken this kind of step. I also would like to encourage you to become a point of coalescence. And a convergence minus coalescence is a very, very low grade convergence. And many times it doesn't happen. So coalescence happens only around an empty space, because that's where things will gravitate. And that's a very higher level of leadership function, leadership of emptiness, where I am not too much of myself. I am not too much of holding too much arrogance that I'm doing a great job, but I'm willing to partner with so many people very quietly, in a very, very quiet way. So I think that's the way forward. India has, I have come across in my life as an administrator, so many wonderful people who want to do so many wonderful things. And this point of coalescence, which I just mentioned to you, you will see crowds will gather around this. And this Uddam's 3 platform, coupled with what Mr. Kant was saying, that hub in the Niti Aayog, and then Ministry of MSME, when I was there, they started a project called Uddam Sakhi. So several things which are there, but sitting here in this ministry, I am the biggest beneficiary of all this, because this is part of my responsibility, that women should have better times. They should have a greater time. They should be able to actualize themselves better. So in a way, it's the kind of dream for us getting fulfilled. And so I thank you all for this initiative. I look forward to more partnership in the days to come. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much, because these were such brilliant points. I'm sure everyone agrees with them. And your statement of solutions lie in the ecosystem really, is one of the many, many very, very real and applicable things that you have left us thinking about. So thank you very much for your time. We are hoping that this landscape study, this Udyam Sri campaign can be amplified with collective support, just like you mentioned, and with the support of the Ministry of Women and Child Development as well. And thank you very much. And Surya, I will request you to step in right now, but thank you, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, Nagma. Thank you so much, Mr. Mishra. As you rightly pointed out, there is a need to showcase success stories of women entrepreneurs in India to motivate others and to demonstrate the transformative value that women entrepreneurs can bring to the society. With this, I would now like to request Mr. Mohan Mishra, Ms. Vidya Shah, and Ms. Nagma Mullah to launch the much-awaited landscape study on women entrepreneurship. May I please request you to hold up the report for the photograph of the report launch?
I think you hold it on my behalf also.
No problem, sir, we will. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mishra, Ms. Shah, and Ms. Mullah for launching the landscape study on women entrepreneurship. This report will be available to download on the Edelgate Foundation website post this event. This report sets a great context for today's panel discussion, and therefore I am going to request Niti Shah, Senior Lead Campaigns and Projects at Edelgate Foundation, who's also spearheading the Udyam Sri campaign, to share the key highlights of the report and to delve deeper into the context as well as key actionable items from this report. Over to you, Riddhi.
Thank you, Surya, and thank you all of you for joining us today. The Edelgate Foundation has commissioned a landscape study report across 13 states of India, and I will briefly be running you through the key pointers that have emerged from this report. The rationale behind the entire report was to see how we can recognize women as equal contributors to the economy, and the factors that allowed us to think through the entire context of the report were that women make up for 50% of India's population. India is the third largest startup ecosystem in the world. Less than 15% of all enterprises are women-owned in India, despite the fact that we are the third largest ecosystem startup. Average global GDP is at 37%. Despite that, India has a minimal share only at 18%. And looking at a global focus for this, UN SDG 5 as well as generation equality are all factors that informed our pretext for this study. Moving ahead, the factors that we wish to understand better were all around what a woman entrepreneur goes through while setting up her enterprise and while attempting to scale it. The evolving research around us when we looked at all secondary research was that gender equality is absolutely imperative to boost economy. Challenges faced by women entrepreneurs in the ecosystem, as well as the enabling factors such as NGOs, intermediary agencies that play a role to encourage small and micro women entrepreneurs to scale up and set up their enterprises. Awareness and access to resources and finances being a very important factor. While a woman might be skilled, might also have access to a particular market, may not have the requisite awareness of government schemes. Entrepreneurial spirit enables self-sufficiency as well as Atmanirbharta. We wanted to understand better how much the relation between setting up of enterprises plays into the overall success of the woman as an individual, as well as an earning member of the workforce. And finally, multi-stakeholder efforts, why they're important and how they can inform better our interventions through the Udyam Sri campaign. Going quickly over some of the sample specifics, this was done over 13 states in India with more than 1,200 women. 60% of these women were between the ages of 26 and 40 years. 49% women, literally half of the women that we interviewed and collected data from, had below poverty line cards. And case studies from the grassroots network of Edelgift Foundation's work have been included. We've also covered the impact of COVID-19. Some of the key highlights to quickly go over these are that there is a greater sense of agency over their bodies. Women entrepreneurs, 36% of women entrepreneurs felt that they could take decisions on the number of children they would want to have after becoming entrepreneurs. 43%, and prior to 43%, the figure was at 32%, but 43% women after becoming entrepreneurs felt that they could decide where they wanted to go for treatment for illnesses or what sort of doctors they might want to visit. Moving ahead to sense of self and mental health, 88% women felt proud that they could earn, be a part of contributing to their family. 73% felt more confident, and 32% women entrepreneurs reported reduced mental stress because they had an outlet, a creative outlet, as well as an ability to play a fair part in what the family's success would look like. Key highlights with regard to risk aversion based on financial and social factors. The inhibition to take risk leads to the inability of women in taking loans. Financial institutions have primarily been designed keeping in mind the male worker, and this does make it difficult for women to step up, seek loans, request for financial advice, and therefore 9% women accessed any kind of loan. 83% women report that they cannot mortgage assets because they don't have assets in their names. This makes it all very complicated and it sets up a series of barriers and challenges to a woman who might be confident, might have a skill, but yet not be in the position to have capital to set up her business. Looking at profitability and spending, only 1/3 of women entrepreneurs earn up to 500 rupees a month out of all the women entrepreneurs that we spoke with. And more than half of the women entrepreneurs were not able to earn even 100 rupees a day. Despite this, when we look at the next slide, we see that their expenditure basket is split between 4 key factors: 65% in food, 53% in children's education, 51% in clothing, and 24% at health and medical. And the last bucket of key highlights that emerged were with regard to investing in better quality of life for self and family. 52% women entrepreneurs reported that their family ate better and more nutritious food. 83% women entrepreneurs were able to ensure better quality of education, including sending their children to private schools. All of this points to us and tells us that despite the fact that accessing loans is difficult for women, despite the fact that there's not high profitability yet because they haven't learned how to diversify their enterprises or scale them up, we still see that there is an improved A, quality of life, B, mental health conditions, C, improved education levels for their children, and so on and so forth. Leading to our final piece for which this research report was conducted, which is what are the sort of recommendations that emerge from studies like this, and how do we implement them in our interventions as representatives of various stakeholder groups? Bridging the awareness and the access gap to amplify existing government schemes. As per our data, we've been aware of more than 700 different schemes, yojanas, policies, aids, and toolkits set up over the last decade by the government, various governments. We need to ensure that we're able to use the ones that are in place and amplify them. Stakeholders not working in silos, but building inclusivity together, something that Mr. Mishra just addressed very pertinently, the importance of coming together to do this. NGOs promoting cross-learning to build skills and learning from each other. Long-term funding from agencies to strengthen and sustain women enterprises. Ease of registration of enterprises and the formalization process, decreasing the hurdles so that women can register enterprises and avail of the schemes, government defining roles and responsibilities for autonomous and industry bodies, ensuring that there's immense clarity in what bodies like an FIWE or a FICCI might play as a crucial role in facilitating this, local mentorship through women enterprises to formalize, scale, or diversify. Mentorship is key, hand-holding is key, and the study strongly reflects that. Finally, looking at open source resources and platforms, such as the one that you're on, it's essential for us to keep our studies, our documents, our lessons completely open source without any price to it, so that most number of people can access it, and for us to have platforms such as this one to engage in dialogue upon pertinent issues. Thank you, and over to Surya.
Thank you, Riddhi. Now, without delay, I would like to introduce you to the moderator of today's two-part panel discussion, Ms. Faye D'Souza, who is a seasoned journalist and an entrepreneur. Welcome, Faye, and over to you to take forward today's event.
Thank you so much for that introduction. And I also want to thank Livelihood Foundation for organizing this event and for focusing your work and your energy on women entrepreneurs and empowering women on the ground to be able to have better agency over their lives, over their bodies, over their healthcare, things that we know actually are life-altering. So what I love about the reports that you have released, and I was going through some of the details, while you were reading it out as well, is that it really forms a basis or a foundation for anyone who hopes to make a difference in this area. And there are so many stakeholders, the financial institutions, there's government agencies, there are government projects, there are not-for-profit projects, and CSR projects, everyone who hopes to in some way reach out and make an impact in the area of either funding or empowering women who are starting their own businesses. It's amazing that you've created this amazing sort of database that people can refer to. It forms a really strong steel structure to build any project or any plan on. So I want to thank you for that, and this Uddam Stree campaign that you have launched to find ways to increase those numbers of women who feel better, agency over their lives because they have started businesses, to give them access to loans, to give them access to government services. I found it interesting that despite the fact that we have so many great, projects and so many great services that have been announced from government for women in terms of assistance to just launch their own businesses, there does seem to be a lack of awareness and very few women taking the government up on its offers. And maybe there's something that we can do there to solve those problems as well. I want to go straight to our first panel because obviously we're all here to hear our panelists speak. It's called Harnessing the Policy and Corporate Ecosystem to Encourage Women Entrepreneurship. I want to do a quick round of introductions to our very illustrious panelists this morning in our first panel. Mr. Chiranjit Singh is the Joint Secretary for the Ministry of Rural Development. Mr. Singh is an Indian Forest Service officer of the MP cadre with a Master in Philosophy Strategic Studies from Madras University and a Master of Science from the Kurukshetra University. He's an environmentalist with vast administrative experience in the central government and state government functioning. Mr. Singh, thank you for joining us. Ms. Vidya Shah is the Executive Chairperson of the Livelihood Foundation, the philanthropic arm of Edelweiss Group. It's under her leadership that the foundation has become a catalyst for change and is dedicated to collaborative philanthropy. It's a pleasure to have her here. Ms. Jyoti Vij is the Deputy Secretary General of FICCI. Her domain expertise is, ranges from agriculture to banking and finance, capital markets, environment, also MSMEs, mining, and among others. So we're really looking forward to her opinion on the subject. Ms. Aparna Upaluri is a program officer at the Ford Foundation. She works for gender, racial, and ethnic justice at the Ford Foundation Office of India, Nepal, and Sri Lanka. A primary focus of her work has been violence against women and girls. Ms. Soumya Rajan is the founder and the CEO of Waterfield Advisors. Ms. Rajan is leading an independent multifamily office and wealth advisory firm. She has 25 years of experience in financial services. And she's been named more than once as among the leading women in finance in our country, which is really cool. So I'm always admirers of women who sort of take the world of finance by storm. We have Ms. Aarti Dar, who's an independent journalist who has worked for many, many years, in all of the subjects, including health, education, women, and environment. And she's also served as a senior media resource trainer consultant with UNICEF. I welcome all of you to this conversation. I'm pleased to note how many women we have on the conversation. But Mr. Singh, as our sole man on the conversation, I want to first welcome you and thank you for your time and your insights. We're basically in this panel, we're looking at how we can harness all of the strength that policy and government gives us and all of the strength that is the CSR arm or corporate India gives us in order to encourage more women to be entrepreneurs and to change their lives. So my first question obviously will be to you, Mr. Singh, as to how the government can play that role, how policies that already exist, and I know that there are many, can be channelized to reach the right people, both in information and to give them confidence to be able to, take advantage of these policies and make best use of them. Mr. Singh?
Okay, thank you very much. Am I audible?
Yes, you are. Please go ahead.
Okay, a very nice good morning to everybody, and I hope that everybody is keeping safe and taking all the precautions because the times are very, I don't want to say very critical, so we need to take all the safety protocols. So before I answer the question, I will give you just a brief background that what we are doing. In the Ministry of Rural Development, we are implementing one scheme called National Rural Livelihood Mission. And in this, we mobilize women from the poor households. And you would be happy to know that we have mobilized 7.4 crore households, one woman from these 7.4 crore households into 67 lakh self-help groups. So we tell them they need to work together so that they can leverage their strength. And the second thing is we provide them a revolving fund and community investment fund. Revolving fund we provide them after 3 months, and community investment fund we provide them after 6 months, so that they learn how to save the money, then interlend the money, then return the money, so that the group activity becomes strong, and as a group they can take up various activities. And you would be happy to know that we have given them around 13,000 crores from 2014 onwards. This may appear to be a very small amount, but see the impact of this. As they interlend the money, the banks also get the confidence. Then they go to the banks and then they take loans. You will be surprised to know that in these last 6-7 years, they have leveraged 3.5 lakh crore, I'm saying. So much amount of money has been leveraged by these groups from the banks. Because banks also know that if they give money to such groups, they can get the return also in time. And the further, I'm happy to say that the NPA for these groups is less than 2%. You go to any company anywhere, you can't find such a low NPA. This shows the strength of the women and the strength of the group. When they function in a group, then a whole new strength comes into place. And as you were mentioning about the entrepreneurships, and a study was also presented, we are also working to provide livelihood opportunities to these women households so that they can come out of the vicious circle of the poverty. For them, we have got different type of programs. One of the program is Startup Village Entrepreneurship Program. And in that, we have formed around 1.5 lakh entrepreneurs up to now. So it's a small beginning, but the challenges are there. So I would like to highlight the challenges here because maybe we can get some good cooperation or suggestion from the panel that how we can go forward. The biggest challenge is that these are the village women. They don't have much knowledge about the business, that what type of business they should take up, what type of market study needs to be done so that they can take up those type of entrepreneurships only. So most of the time they take up the same run-of-the-mill entrepreneurship so that they don't earn much profit. But if some studies are made available to them, I'm 100% sure they will be much more successful. And then my second problem is that they need professional business counseling, hand-holding, and mentorship also. We need help in this direction also, that how we can get help in this. And the third thing is the right financial products at reasonable rates for the finances of these businesses, because they face difficulty in leveraging the credit from the banks. So if this can be helped, this will be a very good thing. And the next thing I wanted to highlight is that the market linkages and efficient price discovery for both for the raw material and for the sale of the products also. And if they can be helped in this, I think it will be a very good thing. So these were few things which I wanted to highlight.
Very well said, Mr. Singh. Challenges that I'm sure everyone on this panel right now would want to aid in solving for. Ms. Vidya Shah, my next question is to you. Congratulations, first of all, on a big day, and congratulations on this report that, like I said, I found very enlightening. But I want to understand from you, when you looked at the report and from the work that you have been doing on the ground, where do you see the massive gaps right now that can be filled through an association of government and corporate to reach out to women who want to be entrepreneurs?
I think one of the reasons we had to do this study is because, we've always felt, or there is a theory out there that there are cyclical reasons for falling female labor participation rates or lower involvement of women in being entrepreneurial. But the truth actually is that it is more structural. And the structural reasons actually emerge from the huge informality that women have to undergo, whether it's in terms of employment or it's in terms of entrepreneurship. So there's this element of informality, which then leads to lower financialization, lower formalization, and the associated problems with that. A lot of women find barriers not only at home but also in the workplace, either in terms of longer commutes, which prevent women from looking at a career, or in terms of safety in workplaces and issues of that. So this, when informality weighs so much on women's participation in the economy, then you have to step back and look at it as a structural issue and not as a, this happens and, this will come back, or it's the pandemic and, it will come back to what it used to be. So when you start looking at the structural issues, you need evidence. And I think the report has gone a reasonably long way in trying to put together the evidence around what are the 3 or 4 main issues that really hold women back. And if you see, I think that the challenges are, on the one hand, around society, community, family, and norms and mindsets. But there's also an issue around, the economic structures in which businesses operate, and the women's perceived lower understanding of that. And I think we need to work on both levels. I think a lot of work that's gone on in the space of of women and girls and involvement in the economy has been in making them employable, and really focusing on education, focusing on building skills. But I think there's a huge element of what happens when families and communities rally behind women and girls and provide that enabling environment. And there's a whole set of things that need to get done around it. But when you look at the other side, which is what does it mean to be an entrepreneur, and what are the specific things that I think all entrepreneurs face challenges, but what are the specific things that hold women back? And I think access to markets, access to networks, and access to finance. These are the three things that really stand out. And this is where we need to work more as a collective, as opposed to, it's just government and government schemes, but how does industry federations, non-profits, and all of us who are really interested in this space, how can we work together? I think that's really the crux of what we're trying to solve for.
I just want to quickly ask you did say access to finance, to networks and markets. When you say networks, what do you mean exactly? And how do you see that gap being filled up?
I think, we do have a lot of, the reason networks are really important is because they end up serving as both platforms for enabling business as well as enabling knowledge, mentorship. And this can happen only when there is a concerted effort that is focused on women and women-related challenges. So if you look at some of the programs, for example, we've been part of, whether it's Mandeshi and the Business School for Rural Women Entrepreneurs, or a lot of the work that Koro has been doing, preparing women for either political participation, economic participation, or greater, or rights around property and so on and so forth. A lot of it has happened because they have built women's networks. I think the success of even the National Rural Livelihoods Mission has largely been because it's enabled women to come together and build their own networks. And I think that is super important in everything that we want to do.
I want to take that question then to Ms. Soumya Rajan, because we're talking about finance. And it has come up that, women are, and we know this across the board, not just women who are entrepreneurs, but also generally women as investors tend to be a little risk averse when it comes to overextending, taking loans. They're worried about being able to pay it back. They don't have assets to mortgage. A lot of times financial services aren't available at the ticket size that we're talking about or we're looking at. Where is the solution here? Has microfinancing not really made a dent in what needs to be done?
Thank you, Faye, and thank you, everyone. I'm delighted to be here as part of the panel, and many congratulations to Edelgive on the launch of this very, very important piece of work. So from my lens as an entrepreneur, I can say that one of the things that I've always faced was raising capital. Because I think everyone, when they start off as an entrepreneur, if you were given a similar set of resources, invariably you'll find that women are slightly disadvantaged in the resources that they have. And therefore, when they start itself lower in terms of access to resources, their ability and the probability of success actually diminishes. So it's very important when women are starting out in a business to actually have that, to a large extent, the financial support. So while there is obviously a lot of emphasis that needs to happen in terms of what culturally, as a society, we do, sometimes the financial support is often quite underestimated. And here, I think, Faye, the main issue is really around both the access to credit as well as the understanding of credit. So the access to credit really, and just to give you quite an anecdotal story here. So I know that I went to a bank and sought credit when I was starting the company. It was interesting that you have this MSME credit guarantee scheme for women entrepreneurs. But what I ended up seeing through that entire process is that the bank that I was interacting with didn't necessarily treat me slightly differently, either in terms of pricing or in terms of what they expected from me by way of security when I was going out to ask for that loan. What you would normally think in financial services is that if you have a credit guarantee scheme, you would actually have, that's actually been underwritten in some ways by the government. And therefore, you can get a better price in terms of the interest rate, because pricing is a function of also the risk in a particular financial product. And I didn't get the benefit of that. And similarly, the collateral that I was asked for was the same as anybody else. So I sometimes wonder that are banks doing enough, saying that, they've got this guarantee from the government. The government has an extremely laudable proposition in extending this. But at the end of the day, very few women have availed of it because the banks necessarily haven't done what they should be doing. So I think what I would think is that sometimes what happens is the schemes are right, very laudable intentions. The execution is where we do sometimes fail. And
is there enough data to tell us what the payback rate or the behavior of a woman borrower is in comparison to men. I suspect
much better credit. I think invariably you will see that 9 out of 10 times that women actually are better credit risk when you actually look at this entire space. I think the other point really is, again, as the woman entrepreneur, we've achieved that financial independence, and I've shared this in many forums. We've achieved the financial independence. We haven't achieved the financial literacy. So even though we may be entrepreneurs, we are very hesitant when it comes to either going to a bank, going to a venture capitalist, negotiating. I think that's one skill that women really need to get much better at, is our ability to negotiate and not be apologetic for negotiating in a particular manner. So a little bit of that is so cultural, is so socioeconomic in the way we ourselves have to change our behavior. Media role models can play a huge role in just breaking some of these barriers down.
So I turned entrepreneur in the last 1 year, and when I met VCs and angels to raise funds for my organization, the question I was invariably asked is, do you need a co-founder? Do you have a co-founder who will handle either tech or finance? And to me, that sounds like you need a man. Or, why isn't there you need a partner who is male who can handle all of the many things that need to be handled, like tech and finance. So I don't have a male co-founder, and I don't have funding. So this is where we are. I decided to just go off on my own. But it's questions like that that tend to be intimidating, and you can only imagine how much more intimidating it gets down the line. Jyoti Bij is also with us, Secretary General of FICCI. If I'm really honest, Jyoti, we have all of these conversations about encouraging women entrepreneurs, but the numbers just don't support it. Even in the more popular sectors of tech and things like that, it's largely a boys' world. Why haven't we been able to, in the corporate sector, make a dent?
I think, so congratulations at the outset to the Edelweiss team for bringing out this excellent study. It really brings to fore, all the problems that we've been talking. In fact, we did a study with UN Women, just after COVID had, impacted. So, we saw that women enterprises were most impacted by, the COVID onset. And so, at FICCI, right from the morning, I think from Mr. Amitabh Kant to Mr. Mohan Mishra, we heard that there are a lot of initiatives which are being taken by a lot of organizations in terms of giving push to women entrepreneurship, whether it is Niti or, there are organizations at the state level, and there are NGOs, and there are organizations like yours. So I think what at FICCI we're trying to do is to really try and become that coalition. To bring all the like-minded platforms together in order to give a push. Now, to your question on that we don't see enough traction out there, I think all those points have been pretty much highlighted. But what is required is to be able to create an ecosystem, and that is what I think dialogues like these will help. And the Greater 50 initiative FICCI has launched last year essentially intends to do that. I mean, we've been running a FICCI Ladies organization for over 3.5 decades, which is essentially for giving a boost to the women entrepreneurship. But what we see is that much of the women entrepreneurship, when we talk about, is either in the landscape of NGOs, the self-help groups, or it is in some bit in the middle space, and that too in very typified kind of industries. We don't have a lot of women at the corporate level as such. So I think that's where we require people like, the ones that are present here, and also a lot of push from the government to really, create that ecosystem for women entrepreneurship. It is very heartening to see Prime Minister himself acknowledging on the Independence Day that women entrepreneurs is going to be, the flag bearer for the Atmanirbhar Bharat. So I think those are the statements which can probably, bring a lot of confidence that women really need to come to the forefront. We need to have a lot of programs, and that's what we are intending to do under the Greater 50 program, is to, create mentorship. We do have a micro mentor platform, and participants present here can get more details about it, which provides you mentorship in various aspects. You can come and join in either as a mentor or a mentee to try and see what are the areas in which you need some kind of handholding. We're also going to be launching offline mentorship as well once the COVID scenario improves. We are working with those who have signed up on the Women Entrepreneur platform of Niti, and have been doing roadshows almost every fortnight to reach out to them, on various mentorship plans and trying to figure out which are the areas where they need handholding. So those are the gaps which we are trying to fulfill. We are looking at, working with the likes of Mandeshis and all to see if digital financial literacy and business management programs can be reached out far and wide. I mean, they're doing in smaller areas, but if we could aggregate and, make them reach far and wide. So I think what we could do is perhaps try and be a little support in creating that ecosystem. I think much has been said about why we don't have it. I think it's the mindset change which we all together will have to kind of keep pushing together. And I guess all the platforms really need to come together. This is the message that I got from the morning conversation and from some of the conversation happening now.
Very well said. And it is exactly at this point that we need to include Ms. Aparna Okuluri, who works in, with safety for women. And while I was reading the EDGIV report today, and there is a really interesting data point on violence against women. And it said that 42% of those polled said that they experienced lower instances of domestic violence after they had started contributing to the family budget. And I said, oh, that's nice. But that was immediately followed by 31% have experienced an increase in violence. So it's not exactly something that, it's not a linear sort of this thing. But there is an aspect of more agency over healthcare and over children and over one's own body. Where do you see that intersection between women taking control of their own finances and the impact it has on their lives? And what do you think can be done in order to increase that impact? You are on mute, ma'am. We can't hear you. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Faye. Thank you, Vidya and Agma, for having me here on this panel. It's really an honor to be here. Edelgive is a very cherished partner of boards, and we work together on several platforms. Faye, to answer your question, I think, when we speak about building agency, and very often the first stop towards building agency for women is seen as the economic stop. You build economic power and you shift towards agency. But I think that what this report highlights very successfully is that agency building has to take an ecosystem approach. And I'm going to pick up where Vidya left off in terms of, the challenges being structural and that building of women's agency, decision-making power, and shifting their ability to have greater choice over their lives is embedded in multiple structures. So the structures of self, family, market, state, and all of these are intersecting forces that play lives at the level of the individual. So if we say that we want to shift the lives of individual women through entrepreneurship by lifting up their agency, one of the first barriers we recognize is the barriers that women face in terms of their social norms that restrict them in their roles as women. And so, to the point that Soumya was making earlier, what are the norms that are determined around which women have to work? Like, or what you shared earlier about, you go in to seek investment and you immediately hear that where's a man in the picture, right? So there's clearly a much broader ecosystem shift around roles of femininity and masculinity that immediately sort of, in some sense, define the landscape within which this shift towards entrepreneurship can happen. So within that frame, let me try and answer the question that you asked me about violence against women. In the domestic sphere, for example, there's plenty of evidence both within India and across the globe that has shown consistently that women who go out to work, whether in the formal sector or whether it's through entrepreneurship, often face backlash violence, which is exactly what this report reflects, which is there is an initial agency building and then there is backlash violence. And this backlash violence isn't just something that just happens in the home, but it also happens outside of the four walls of the home. So public spaces for women continue to be unsafe. And this is something that increasingly, I think even the government is becoming, more and more aware of. There are many shifts that are happening in terms of, like, let's say the UN Women's Safe Cities program that's beginning to recognize that women's commutes to work, their presence in the public space, their access to public spaces is so key towards building entrepreneurship, voice and agency. So the intersectional approach that this report takes and the kind of work that it'll give is supporting through the partners whom Vidya mentioned, whether it's a Koro, whether it's Mandeshi, whether it's Anandi, these are organizations that recognize that women face violence as a continuum from the private to the public space. So violence doesn't begin or stop at the home or begin or stop outside. So if the public space is unsafe, it reinforces the lack of safety that women feel within their homes as well. So women experience violence as a continuum, and the shifts then also have to be worked on as a continuum. And recognizing then that violence isn't just that act of being beaten or the act of being restricted, but it's also the fear and perception of violence that women feel, which might prevent them from building their agency. So the work that we are trying to support at the foundation is actually working on this continuum. And a lot of our partners work in close association with the progressive policies that the government has put into place to help in their implementation, in building awareness about them. So the triad that Amitabh Kant was mentioning in terms of that Ichha Shakti, Gyan Shakti, and Kriya Shakti, really about agency, awareness, and action. That's the space where a lot of our nonprofit partners whom we work with, that's a space that they occupy. And I think in a sense, they become essential partners in bridging what the policy is trying to enable, and what the corporate sector in some sense can help create a better ecosystem for. And therefore, I think the third sector work that we support becomes an essential bridge towards this. And I hope that I've tried to bridge what you've said with what this panel is about. So thank you for this opportunity.
Yes, you did. Thank you so much. I also want to thank Ms. Aarti Dar for waiting so patiently and listening so patiently, while everyone else spoke. But as was said repeatedly, that there is, while there are people working on the ground, there are people in finance, people in government, there are government projects, there's this massive missing link of information, linking the people who really need this help, and helping them understand how they can take advantage of these projects. Is that, how can that sort of challenge of communication be bridged? How can we use, perhaps success stories to educate more women on how, on the difference that something like this can make?
Thank you everyone for inviting me. It's been a really eye-opening session since morning. I am not an entrepreneur. My limited experience is about journalism, but since I have traveled extensively to rural areas, let me tell you, there is a really lack of information, dearth of information rather, about government schemes and policies and facilities for the beneficiaries. That has been brought out in the report also. I was just glancing through it in the morning. So one way of dealing with it is, that corporates need to go to entrepreneurs now, to villages and rural areas. It can't be the other way around. It's a new world order. So if you're talking of work from home, then let the women in the rural areas connect with corporates in big cities instead of actually coming there, which comes with its own set of problems. Women find it difficult to come come and live in cities. Most of them, many do come, but that is a big barrier. Second would be, can we engage media in, disseminating information about government schemes? It can be either, and I'm not talking of managing media, there's a difference between managing and engaging. You have to make media as a partner, because when you talk of, managing, you give ads, you make payments, that comes with its own set of suspicion, it's propaganda, it's government schemes are being promoted, but that really doesn't help. So if you're engaging with media, then you share with them success stories, as was said in the morning by several speakers. You can share stories with them. You can talk about schemes. You can talk about the facilities government is providing. And it's not only print media. Now you have a vast arena of media. Community radio is one very good tool of sharing this information. And that can be a very localized thing, which is very popular also. I myself work on radio these days, and I can see it has a huge, acceptance in rural community. We can use that. We can tap that resource. And then again, when you talk of media, you need to engage with, language media. English media really doesn't help. It may help policymakers, but when we're going to rural areas, it's the language media where you have to engage with those. And to do that, it is very, very important to sensitize media personnel as well. We are working on health. I'm associated with the NGO. We are working on health, and it's not funny to see how much they lack information. We've been working for 2-3 years now. Absolute lack of information on health. So we have to first train them, sensitize them, tell them. Only then can they come out with quality reports and quality stories. I think these things have to be done simultaneously. It can't be you give finance and you leave other things out. And then when you're talking of hand-holding, so how do you do that? Women don't have legal knowledge. You have to tell them that. Marketing, it's not enough to ensure that women only sign. No, they need to be told about marketing, the latest trends. You have to involve them in various things. Only then can they be successful. I think this is something we have seen. And the kind of barriers we face as NGOs working with these, you engage with media, nobody's willing to give funds, CSR funds, because they don't see a building coming up after they give us funds. It's a very subtle kind of a thing. Nobody wants to engage with media. Okay, we'll give you an ad, place it in the newspaper. It doesn't help. It's seen as propaganda. If you want real engagement, then you have to, involve them in this. See, ultimately, the journalists also come from the same society. They have women in their household. They will tell you what is needed.
Forgive me for interrupting you, but there is the advent of the internet now and videos and WhatsApp and things like that. Has that made a difference to communication?
It has, but then again, suppose language becomes a big barrier. Suppose we want to take this discussion to a rural India. They will not understand. You have to tell them in their own language. That is what they understand. I think this is something we have to think very seriously. Even in health, when we talk about health issues, they have access. They have access to websites, but it's all in English. They find it very difficult to translate it to Hindi. It's very time consuming. So can we think differently? That's my point. I don't know whether I'm making sense, but this is...
No, but you're making a lot of sense. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I wish we had more time. But
you can call me. I'm always available. Give me a call. I'm always available.
I feel like we should get this group together informally to also just brainstorm, because everybody has such amazing ideas and we haven't given people enough time. But we have run out of time, and I apologize for that. Thank you all for being generous with your ideas, with your patience, and listening and listening to each other. It gives me a lot of hope to hear what each person has said on this panel, because obviously we do not lack the expertise, we don't lack the intention, we don't lack the solutions. There seems to be a gap, perhaps, through which a lot of good work is maybe not reaching the right places. And I want to thank organizations like the Livelihood Foundation that are looking to fill those gaps, or to make those bridges, so that the people who are doing, people like all of you on the panel who are doing great work will actually be able to make sure that none of that work slips through the cracks at all. I want to thank all of you for being kind enough to give us your time on this panel. And it has been extremely educative, Mr. Singh, and all of the ladies, thank you for joining us. Before we go into our next panel on this very interesting day, there is a video that has been prepared as part of the Uttam Sri campaign that we'd like to play out to sort of, especially on the note of communication and how we can get this message across. Can we watch that video, please? Welcome now as we move into our second panel discussion of the day. And this is a topic that I personally feel very strongly about: breaking the glass ceiling, addressing gender barriers to unlock potential of women entrepreneurs. Let me do a quick introduction of our panelists. We have Dr. Amar Patnaik. He's a member of parliament and he joins us right now, Rajya Sabha. And he's also a politician from Odisha, the head of the BJD's IT wing. He's a public intellectual. He was with the Indian Audit and Accounts Service. He was an officer and a former principal accountant general of Sikkim, Odisha, West Bengal, and Kerala. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Patnaik. Ms. Nagma Bulla is the CEO of Edelgive Foundation. She has really worked so much on fostering collaboration and partnering with stakeholders to bring about social change. So it's really good to have her. Ms. Archana Vyas, Deputy Director, Programs, Advocacy and Communications at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, that's doing a lot of great work right now on the ground in India. Chetna Sinha is the founder of the Mandeshi Foundation, working to empower women in drought-prone areas of rural India by teaching them entrepreneurial skills, access to land, and means of production. Japleen Parsilcha is the founder and director of Feminism in India, obviously a challenging job in India. She's a writer and educator, campaigner, and researcher. She has a lot of experience in digital media and online publishing as well. I welcome all of you to this conversation. Thank you so much for joining us. In our previous conversation, we talked about the difference that entrepreneurship makes to women, especially in rural India, how it empowers them to have more, perhaps, agency over their lives, over their bodies, over their money, over their decisions, and what a difference that makes to entire families when we empower one woman. And there are several, one of the questions that came up from the audience, which we weren't able to tackle in the previous conversation because of lack of time, I feel somehow fits this panel better. It was a question about the prejudice that these women go up against. So there's prejudice in the household, there's prejudice in the village, the society, the community that they're part of, extended family. And then there is prejudice in financial institutions that they approach, in partners that they're talking to, in the network that they're talking to, especially depending on the kind of business they're in. If they're making pickles on rolling papad, it's perhaps people will say, no, that sounds like something a woman should do. But when women enter the spaces of manufacturing, for example, when women enter the spaces of finance, there is a prejudice that they have to deal with every step of the way. And it's not a prejudice that's very far from corporate India as well. Women still encounter a certain amount of prejudice. So what can we do to sort of bridge that gap? That's effectively the conversation that we're having in this second panel. We are going to try, I promise to our audience, make time for questions this time. But I will start quickly moving to the panelists because I don't want to waste any time. Dr. Patnaik, I will start with you first. Also, thank you for being very bravely the only gentleman on this panel. I welcome all the women. I feel very happy when we have such nice diversity. Dr. Patnaik, you worked as a civil servant in Odisha for many years. You are now representing Odisha in Rajya Sabha. I want to understand from you where you believe that multi-stakeholder collaboration is as far as government, corporate, state, center in creating an infrastructure for women to take control of their lives.
Thank you first of all to Edelgive and the organizers. Yeah, it feels good to be the single man in the galaxy of women entrepreneurs that's there in this panel. Thank you so much. Yeah, before I come into the ecosystem issue that you talked about, the collaboration that you talked about, let's forget that our entire discussion of women entrepreneurship is now currently based on the economic variable. We have been talking about women empowerment from the economic variable, but where is the political entrepreneurship within the women? Now that's something that our Chief Minister Naveen Patnaik has been putting it on the agenda in national politics by us seeking political empowerment. How long would the women keep on airing their grievances? I think they should be in a position to decide when people come to them with grievances. So that's something which we have to really work on. So we cannot divorce discussion on women entrepreneurship without discussing political empowerment of women at all levels. That is empowerment in not just limited to reservation that we generally understand, but more importantly, to take a decision themselves on what affects their lives. So that's one issue, which I have raised in the Parliament also recently in the last session. We all know we did discuss about the gender pay gap. We discussed about the stereotypes, the motherhood penalty, and issues relating to, I think, which is one point which has emerged during my discussions at various, after entering in the political arena, is that within the women entrepreneurs, there are different categories. There are young girls who are passed out of colleges in villages. They do not want to do stitching and making all those dukkati and all that in sticks. They would want to, they have learned computers and they probably want to do a different kind of entrepreneurial activity. So we need to actually diversify our skill education towards women, which we have to think about at a national level. I was hearing Amitabh Kant in the morning briefly, and in fact, when he comes before the finance committee, in which I'm a member, we did tell him about this. But you just look at the entrepreneurial ability of our women during this crisis. They made the masks. They made huge number of masks, and they could supply to the entire country of 1.3 billion people. And in Odisha, they went down to every household for awareness. So the ability or the potential of women entrepreneurs in different areas is enormous, and it's not really limited to the very small things that we discussed and that they've been traditionally doing. So I think women entrepreneurship has now reached a stage in rural India where it should be elevated into something like a micro medium. I think they are aspirational now. So they will have to be handheld to a position of, for farmers, we have had the farmer producer organizations. We have now the vegetable producer organizations. So if they are brought into the MSME network, then they will have to have a separate kind of a framework which we have to work on. The crux of the problem, I think, in having this collaboration, in talking about women entrepreneurship, is the issue of property rights, land tenures. Unless we have been discussing this at several fora. I have been attending several fora, but never has there been a discussion on to look at the laws which allows how the laws allow in a matriarchal society where I was posted in Meghalaya long ago, how the property flows, not just the name, but the property flows, and how does it happen in non-matriarchal societies, which are patronal societies. And even though the courts, the Supreme Court has been time and again expanding the coverage to include women, include the daughters, include the wife, I think there is a need to look at the law to give property rights, land rights to women, in which case they could actually use that as a collateral for building any kind of entrepreneurship activity that they think of. So that's thing for me of paramount importance. The second thing is for this collaboration to take place is, as Mr. Amitabh Kant was saying, is to be, by the way, Mr. Mohan, Mishra also, we have worked together in Shillong long ago for 30 years. I didn't get to hear him, but the point is, we need to have the implementation of women-oriented schemes much wider and a much better way, so that they have the free time to spend for entrepreneurship. They couldn't be going to get water, they couldn't be looking after the child, they couldn't be going to agriculture field and where it is not even recognized as a disguised unemployment, and still be expected to do things. Take off. They can't be perpetually in a lifetime of entrepreneurship of a woman who enters in a rural area into entrepreneurship at the age of, let's say, 25 or 30. For 30 years, she couldn't be making candles and incense sticks, and she has an aspiration. It is to grow. So we have to give shape and color and framework to it. So the implementation of government programs and schemes is very, very important. Someone talked about health. I think that's very important because the ability to actually perform depends on that. In fact, I am following the factors of production. If you look at the factors of production, land, labor, capital, skill, and linkages, I think all are equally important. We have to give all those linkages to women if we want them to succeed in the marketplace. So when you talk about linkages, we have to decrease the information asymmetry. We have to make them digitally efficient, not just digitally knowledgeable, but digitally efficient. And we know markets are ruthless. So if you have to build entrepreneurship and take it to a level where they can compete in the market, we have to make them professional. And just like what many of you are already professionals because of the, you have struggled and you have the education, I think we have to take it down to the rural areas. Unless things change there, we can't get the labor force participation to about 50%, 50%, even if it's lower than Bangladesh, 36%, we can't get it even there. So we need to take it there. Whatever we are, some of us who are more fortunate, they will have to be brought down, taken down to that level. They could not actually be only be in the ancillary business. They have to be getting into, taught to be professional to handle main scale manufacturing, maybe even at micro level in certain areas that has to be identified. The point relating to the one you said about collaboration, the collaboration that you were talking about between the private sector, between the government and the women entrepreneurs themselves is extremely critical, because unless the private sector, or even I would put it differently, I would say the non-state actors, unless the non-state actors jump into this agenda, we really cannot achieve the kind of female force, labor force participation that we are thinking of, we are aspiring for. And that kind of collaboration can happen only when the understanding between these three stakeholders is very robust. Each one understands the problem, and the agenda setting has to be done in consultation with women. Mind you, they may not have studied much, they may not have read much, but their aspirations are high. And trust me, I have visited areas in Malkangiri, which is one of the most left-wing prone areas in the entire country. But there, even the tribal women, they have aspirations after watching television to become something at that stage. So it's just that all the cogs in the wheel have to fit in, because that lady over there doesn't have access to internet, can't do banking. She has to get on the top of a tree to get connect to a banking arrangement. So these things have to happen, and these things can happen not just by government alone. It has to have strong kind of mentorship from the private sector, partnership from the non-state actors, and only then can we hope to reach something that we all aspire. Let me also end by saying that our Mission Shakti in Orissa, a very successful experiment, and when I was posted in Kerala, I've seen the Kudumsri, which has a history of success. But I think the time has come when they are in a position to take off. And we have to, when we say we want to build women entrepreneurship, we have to think about even the existing entrepreneurial skills to be taken to the next level. And that's a tall order. And that order can be settled only when all of us collaborate. Thank you.
Very well said, sir. Thank you for that. I'm just going to quickly move from panelist to panelist to save time. Ms. Nagma Mullah, if I may call you Nagma, please.
Yes, please.
If we're going to be completely honest about the impact that the pandemic, unfortunately, we've discovered we're not past it. In fact, we might be worse off now than we were last year. It has had a terrible impact on women in the country. Women have lost more jobs. Fewer women have actually got their jobs back. Women who were running small businesses found it difficult to keep those businesses going. A lot of those businesses have wrapped up. They're going to find it even more difficult now to start up again. Because now they've incurred losses. How do we now have this massive sort of gorge that we have to jump to even get back to where we were pre-pandemic. How bad is it at this point from the data that you're looking at? And what sort of a challenge has the pandemic brought to the work that you were already doing on the ground?
No, yeah, even without the pandemic, the data was abysmal. See, the fact of the matter is that pandemic or not, the systems, the structures, everything has been designed by men for men. In a time when women were not, even visible around, whether it's work cultures, whether it's, how many toilets are there in a building, how many toilets are there on the road. The systems and structures have been designed by men only considering what is easy for men. So women have almost had to barge in, almost have to break one by one to foster an in-role. And then what we do, in my opinion, is also make them exceptional women instead of making them normal women. Every time a woman breaks a barrier, she becomes this exceptional leader. I start worrying then, because then you're making her this, you're pedestalizing her and making it difficult for normal women to think they can also do it. So the structures, whatever was gained was hard-earned gain. The last 20 years was seeing more and more women in workforce, more and more women negotiating, their way into these spaces. And pandemic has hurt it massively. Only even in the women that we surveyed, and we surveyed them, before the pandemic, and we were speaking during and after the pandemic also, only 1% had availed any government scheme. Only 9% had taken any kind of loan. The amount of investment that they had made in their businesses was, 18,000, as an average, or sometimes not even that, because information, structures, norms have always been a huge burden. First, she has to overcome her personal, beliefs that have been, normalized for her. And then she has to learn things in a system that has not been crafted for her. So why we think and why we've been so insistent that Udyam Stree has to happen now is in this whole, disaster, like all kinds of disaster. And I would like to look at this as a disaster of sorts. Like all kinds of disaster, the burden of it all comes finally to the woman, whether it is going and accessing water for her children, or whether giving up all her agency and providing for the larger family. So Udyam Stree and the multi-stakeholder approach in that context becomes very important, because at least in the redesigning, we have to provide for this, we have to design for this. We will have to keep aside resources, attention, and policies that particularly go after this problem, unlike the first time when it was not even visible for us. I hope I've answered this question as crisply as possible.
You have, and on that very note, I want to move on to Ms. Archana Vyas, who's with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, also a foundation that's working on the ground. I know that you're looking at this from as one of the goals of sustainable development as well, but how can we encourage women? Because it's not just about starting up, it's also about staying up, which is that there are constant challenges that come up, and you're learning on a daily basis. There is you wake up in the morning and you don't really know what the world is going to throw at you when you run your own business. So it's about hand holding and just instilling confidence on a steady and consistent basis. What needs to be done in order to make sure that women who even find the strength to start something manage to keep it open, manage to keep it going?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Faye, and Dr. Patnaik as well as Nagma have listed some of the enablers which are very, very critical. But first of all, I'll simply say that the stereotypes, like Nagma said, that the world has been built for men. Just the stereotyping of women is a big barrier, because if we think about it, the occupations or work opportunities have been genderized, right? If I say a farmer or a pradhan or a mukhya, the image that we conjure is that of a man. And likewise, on the other side, if you think about a nurse or a beauty parlor service, you think of a woman. So it is stereotyping and a genderized occupation. So first of all, I think those norms have to be broken, and I would say that the positive deviance has to be highlighted as well. Media and entertainment can play an important role. Like you have, in the past, there has been objectivity as well as subjectivity of women and stereotyping them, but it is high time that these roles and the positive deviance is mainstream. The second thing that I would say is that if you think about entrepreneurship, it is pretty much women tend to be more risk averse, and even in the report that came out today, that it is 6% of women who actually choose to be entrepreneurs on their own, right? So there is already, I would say, irrationality, or I can say irrational optimism that the women are demonstrating when they come forward to take on those jobs and be entrepreneurs, like yourself, right? It is that you are showing this irrational optimism as well. So therefore, it is important that they are they're encouraged, which means that they will have to be trained. Women, training has to be provided in terms of their own intellectual property, because not necessarily women are very good in terms of negotiations, protecting their own rights. They're not very good at that. So the ecosystem has to be such that encourages women in terms of thinking about their own rights and encourage them as well. The other thing that I would say is that even in terms of instruments that have to be put forward for women, they have to be gender blind, right? So if you think about, one of the interesting experiments that I was reading about is the Boston Philharmonic Orchestra, when they were choosing their performers, and Dr. Patnaik, he must be aware as well, is when you had the performers actually play behind the curtain, more and more women performers were chosen, right? So the loans, like you said, hey, co-founder, do you have a co-founder? I think we have to be gender blind, right? Instruments have to be gender blind. That's super critical. And then I would also say that the networks for women have to be built out, right? Again, my hypothesis is that women have smaller networks. So if we allow women to network within women networks, again, there is cognitive disadvantage, because if you tell a woman that she's going to perform for mathematics, she scores lower because she knows that she's a woman and she's going to be tested on math. So I would say that the networks have to be networks beyond women networks. Those are super critical. Just like Dr. Patnaik is here, we should have more men within this forum as well. It should not be gender networking with gender. But as far as Gates Foundation is concerned, a little bit about the question that you asked in terms of how are we looking at collectives and empowerment of collectives. We work very closely with self-help groups, informal collectives as well. We see huge potential. The numbers are phenomenal, as Dr. Patnaik again said, and Nagma said, that they have come forward and, even at the time of distress, have demonstrated economic empowerment, contributed to economic empowerment. There's enough and more statistics that if women come forward, even in terms of GDP contribution and even absolute quantums can be really phenomenal. I think the public sector, the private sector, organizations like ourselves, philanthropic organizations, have to come forward to encourage, to build ecosystem that is more conducive. for women to participate, make it more encouraging. At the foundation, I think one of the big things that we are doing is that we are just being gender intentional with all our programs. So our gender equality team encourages us. There is a tool, there is almost a nudge that before we make an investment, every investment passes through gender intentionality, which means that we are not only doing it for ourselves, we are also cascading the same principles to our partners who will be part of those investments. So it is, making sure that there are tools available within the organizations, but also, as a role that we play of convener, that bringing in other organizations to think about gender intentionality, and also building learning networks. I would say that's super critical, because whatever we are learning, what's working, what's not working, we should share with each other. Thanks, Faye.
It's really well said. Thank you so much for sharing those ideas. It's so important to, like you said, sort of remove the gender bias from all aspects of where women are likely to work, because every time, given the fact that they're already sort of jumping so many hurdles, every time we can at least create a neutral playing field, it will be something that's that's helpful. I want to bring in my next panelist. Forgive me. If I may bring in Ms. Chetna, who has been listening very carefully, who had said many times that don't make poor solutions for poor people. Do you believe that that's a mistake we're making? And is that mistake perhaps wider, ma'am, when it comes to creating solutions for women who are poor? Do we create exceptionally poor solutions for women who are poor?
So thanks, Faye. And yes, I mean, when I say this, and I always want that, somebody should come forward and say that, no, keep quiet. We are providing smart solutions to women. I would just love that, I do not have to repeat this, that don't provide poor solutions for people. So, but, extending what Nagma said, and I really appreciate, Mr. Patnaik, also what you have mentioned. That, see, one thing that I was listening in the previous panel also, microfinance industry, JLG lending, joint liability group lending has been more than $20 billion industry, right? Women came forward, they took loan, they formed the group because they didn't have a collateral, they repaid it in time, investors got the returns. Then why only 6% of women choose to become entrepreneurs, right? That is the whole question. Why? And I do believe that, yes, why would they choose it? Because the life is not very easy there. And as Nagma, you have mentioned, it's unfortunate, right, Nagma, that we have to create Udyam Shris of all women coming together that, hey, look at it, we need this. Why? I mean, we have Mudra, we have Jan Dhan, everything. And I'm here not to criticize bank, not to criticize financial sector, but still I would say that even in March 2019 report, what showed with Mudra was that 60% of the loan were in microcredit, microfinance. Why? Because women had created a peer pressure. There was a lot of comfort zone. You don't lose the money, there won't be much default, and it would be easier for banker to do it. Now, here women have broken the glass ceiling. Are we not going to learn the lessons? Why only women will have to always break the glass ceiling? Are we not going to learn the lessons? Why can't we graduate from joint liability group to individual entrepreneurship? And here I'm bringing the Vidya's point, that it's a whole question of bringing into informal to formal, right? We did microcredit, we brought women into formal sector. Yes, we created CBIL rating, I'm talking with technical terms, but we did that. And the whole, I am just amazed by how women picked it up, everything. Then the next step, I would have actually expected the bankers like me should come to the guarantee fund. Why that is not happening aggressively? Nagma, I think with the Udyam Shri, of course, we are always talking about it. Yes, women do not have collateral. At Mandeshi Bank, we have this product, a loan product, where we say that if property is owned by women, you will get rebate in interest, right? Many men come forward and say that, okay, I will share my property with my wife, or, so that I get rebate in interest. These are the structural things. This will happen. Government should come forward, reduce the stamp duty. Some states have done, Mr. Patnaik. They have reduced the stamp duty for the ownership. But if we do that, then you can create the ecosystem, right? I always feel, Faye, that how is ecosystem is going to be created? The CSR fund, non-profits, they can create models, not ecosystem. Ecosystem will be created when mainstream sector and policy makers come together and really look at it, what women have done. And I'll just end saying, giving you another example of how when women do something, how it is not poor, it's very smart. Let me give you one example. That, we have been talking about pandemic, but I was amazed by women who are in animal husbandry and animal rearing. We have our goat doctors. They go and render all paravet services to women who are rearing goats. And they have this whole group, and it's not just SHG, but the groups of women, more than 100 who are rearing sheep and goat. Our women goat doctors, they set up digital animal market, where women farmers can come on that platform, digital animal market, and do buying and selling of animals. Since last 1 year, whole country do not have a digital animal market. Now, what I am saying is that none of big technology company came forward with such ideas of having digital animal market, where on digital groups, women will do buying and selling of animals. And it's not just buying. How would it happen? It will happen with digital financial transaction. Of course, how will digital financial transaction take place unless women will have a digital source of money? It is not possible, right? And so here I want to say, Faye, is that these women, we have digital groups where animal market takes place. Women do buying and selling. The time has come now that mainstream sector needs a financial literacy. They will have to learn from these women who have actually broken the ceiling. But you see them, watch them, what they have done it. If we still want to be on our comfort zone, I find it very uncomfortable, because it's everybody needs to invest in venture capital. How many women who have, I heard in the previous panel, Mr. Singh said that community investment capital, very important, Nagma. I do feel time has come where we say that, okay, our women are reinventing everything. They have proved with joint liability group. We need to now show ourselves, can we create a guarantee fund? Second, that is because women do not have collateral. They will create a collateral. The second is that, in digitalization, and as Mr. Patnaik, you said that young girls in village do not want to do I'm going to clean the cow dung shed and everything. No, they want to have a laptops. They want to do the technology. And I'm so proud that some of our women who are digital Didis, who are moving in the villages with Asha workers, we have digital Didis, and they teach financial transaction to the sarpanch of the village. I would just say, and can you imagine, this girl was going to high school, she wanted to do B.Pharm, and she couldn't do it. She scored 84%. On her marriage day, she got the result. When she was in 10th grade, she was married. She felt so upset that I wanted to be B.Pharm, but said family is not going to invest in my education. Yeah. Okay, now she's raising 2 goats, but at the same time, she's a digital Didi moving around and teaching the digital transaction to our sarpanch. So with this, I would just say, Faye, that, it's it is enough glass ceilings women have broken. It's just a matter of mainstream sector, policy makers, corporate sector, just to see that and customize your solutions. And I do believe that corporate world has to go to village, but not with the poor solutions. Don't try to market to the village. Don't try to see that these are the women who are going to repay the loan. Let's have something like insert the premium of insurance and make them the client, get them as a co-creator. If you do that, then something like, with the huge country like India, we will be able to solve the problem. And I would say, if they are co-creator, they can come with the design of something like digital animal market or something. And I would leave it here. And thank you.
Very well said, ma'am. Thank you. I want to bring in Japleen as well, because it's also a question of communication and how well we can communicate, using your experience of digital media and online publishing. But I want to also make a note here that, while we started off talking about the impact of the pandemic on businesses, on women across the country, this time we're noting a difference in the pandemic. It's reached our villages. It's reached our smaller cities that were largely insulated the last time around. It's perhaps going to take a larger toll on families. It's going to take a larger toll on family incomes. We know that one of the starkest realities of India is that, as far as healthcare is concerned, one bad bout of hospitalization can bankrupt a family, because they sort of break into all of their savings to be able to afford treatment for that one family member. That is likely to happen in our villages, because that's the stories we're hearing in Maharashtra as well. People are being taken from government hospitals to private hospitals in hope that the private guys will have the oxygen that the government hospitals don't have. It's bankrupting families, and what sort of an impact that will have on women and entrepreneurship and all of those things is perhaps a bigger challenge that we're going to have to face in the future. Japleen, Puslicha, you've worked so much in communication, and so much of what needs to be done, especially this year, navigating the next 1 year and maybe a year after that, will be about communicating to the stakeholders, the women on the ground. What is the best way to do that?
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Faye, and thank you, Edelgive, for giving me this opportunity. So, Faye, before I get to your question, I've been listening to everyone, and I really appreciate the points that everybody has raised. I want to speak a little bit about the biases that women entrepreneurs face. And Faye, I was also listening to the earlier session where you talked about how when you went to investors, and the first question that they asked you was, do you have a co-founder? And, translated into, do you have a male co-founder who will take care of the business and, the financial and marketing and sales aspect of it? And I think this is a huge bias that women entrepreneurs face. I myself am a women entrepreneur and a media entrepreneur like you, Faye, and I currently lead both the editorial and the marketing and sales aspect of my business, of my media business. And it is not easy because when it comes to women and business, like these two words are something that, don't go around together. When like this exercise where we ask students or like young people to think of when they hear the word astronaut or when they hear the word business person, who is the first person that they think of? And that is not a woman. And one thing that I also want to, elaborate on this is that women are not trained. Like it's not something that is given as natural that one day she will become a businesswoman or she will start a business. And I am not even right now talking about rural areas. I come from, I'm based in Delhi. I'm born and brought up here. I come from a business family, and I was never taught about business by my father, who runs a business, or as opposed to my male cousins and my partner. And like business is something that was not seen as a natural career growth or career choice for women as it was seen for men. So I think women also lack a lot of confidence because it's not seen as something that they can do. And I definitely did somebody say they're not able to hear me?
No, we can hear you. We can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, there was a comment in the chat box. Okay, so as I was saying, like business is something that is, not seen as a natural career growth or career path for women. And that has a deep impact on women's confidence when it comes to entrepreneurship and starting a business. And I can completely say that that impacted me as well. Secondly, coming to your question about, women in rural areas who are entrepreneurs and are running business and about communication, I feel like, we are missing, like it's great that we are doing panels like these where we are bringing women entrepreneurs on board and we are talking about women entrepreneurship and bringing in experts. But I also feel like that the main challenge, is when women go to the actual markets, wherever your market is, if it's media or agriculture or beauty, fashion, whatever, which are always male dominated. And especially if you go to, like, I was reading EduGive's report and it said that most of the women entrepreneurs, their markets were either food or beauty and fashion. And there we see more women, but because it is also traditionally seen as, women's markets or like women's products. But when we go to non-traditional markets, we see they are mostly dominated by men. And we can do as much empowerment and schemes and everything that the government and also NGOs like EduGive are doing. But I also feel like there's a lack of sensitization when it comes to the people in the market, because we can only so much empower women, but if we do not empower the community, the market that they would be actively working in, and we don't sensitize them, sorry, not empower, but actually sensitize the market that they would be working in, it won't have that much impact. It's the same as saying, that we will talk to, if I just, forget entrepreneurship for 1 second and let's just talk about women empowerment in general. We talk about women empowerment and how patriarchy, etc. But if we are not going to go to the root of the problem, which is a patriarchal mindset and a patriarchal culture, then whatever women empowerment we will do with schemes and with trainings and workshops, it's not going to have the same impact, because we are not talking to the other side of the people. Like, we are only focusing on one side. So I also feel like there has to be a lot of sensitization efforts of people in the market, and I am talking about male entrepreneurs. Like, that's a word that we don't even hear, because it's entrepreneurs and then it's women entrepreneurs. Nobody talks about men entrepreneurs, and I don't see any sessions which are on men entrepreneurs, and there are women there as well. So I feel like that sensitization is really, really important, because I can be an empowered woman and I am an empowered woman, but when I go to my sector, which is the media sector, and I am not received well, or I'm always like, oh, and especially because I work on feminism, so I come in that category of a woman working on women's rights, but I'm always categorized in the woman category, because my work is not seen as important for everybody. Women's rights or feminism is not just for women, it is for everybody, and it is definitely for men to understand that feminism is important. Or, like, I'm just giving an example here. So this can be replicated to any market, I feel. And that sensitization is important, because if women are not well received, like, again, I'm coming back to the example that Faye, you gave. You are such a renowned journalist. Even before you started, I have been following you since many years. And if that kind of question was asked to you, that who is your co-founder and who will manage the marketing and sales of your organization, imagine what kind of challenges other women who don't have that much social capital and privilege would face when they go for investment or funders or whatever. So I think that kind of sensitization is extremely important. Coming back to your question on rural women, I would actually, I don't think that I'm an expert on talking about what are rural women's challenges, because that's not an area that I work on. But I would want to talk a little bit about communication, as you rightly questioned me on that. Again, my strategy and my way to go for it is, it's great that we are talking about women entrepreneurs, and we are holding workshops and fellowships, etc. But I also feel like we shouldn't put women entrepreneurs into a category, because then that makes the whole, there is general entrepreneurs and then there is women entrepreneurs, and I would rather that we don't have that, and we keep it as a one, it's one category, or it's one bracket, and not two categories. Sorry, 1 second.
And regarding comms, again, I also feel like one issue that women entrepreneurs especially face is not talking about their work enough. Women, again, have this lack of confidence, but also a lack of showing off about their work, if I were to just, call it that we don't talk about our achievements and our whatever that we have done enough. And it's I feel like women have this inbuilt, like, not boasting about it. And I'm also speaking from an employer's point of view. Whenever we hire and we receive applications, and there's a huge difference in the way men propose themselves to a specific employer versus how women propose themselves. And it's always like this whole apologetic tone, and like, yeah, I have this, but I'm not sure. And like, I really feel that that's again a space that we need to work on with women entrepreneurs.
In fact, there's a very interesting question, and I'm sorry, we're still running out of time, but I'm going to quickly try and take this question to Dr. Patnaik. This came in from one of our viewers of all the questions that came in. And I found at the question a little bit. It basically asks simply this, that in order to ensure women's entrepreneurship, we also need to ensure that the men and the family patriarchs are also incentivized. How can we do this? I mean, again, I frowned at the question. I got over it. Now we just wait for the answer.
Sorry, can you come with that question, please, for the last part?
So the question says this: to ensure success of entrepreneurship in women, we also need to ensure that the men and the patriarchs of the family are incentivized. How can we do this?
Absolutely, absolutely. Very well said. In fact, that's my point. I said that, taking it from what Jacqueline was talking about, we never discuss when we talk about failed entrepreneurships, experiments or entrepreneurial activities. There are a number of failures. We never say how many of them were male or how many of them were women. In fact, I have a hunch that if we do that, you would actually find that women entrepreneurship is much more successful than men entrepreneurship. But the point is, the male members, the pater familiars in the system, the sensitization will only happen, I think, if not only the cultural level, that the stereotypes have to be changed, the sensitization has to take place in a number of ways that we have discussed. But I come to that point once again, that the legal provisions, the property rights have to be given invariably to women. Now, if we look at the Prime Minister's Awas Yojana, the house which is given is supposed to be, the record of rights is supposed to be made in the name of both men and women, both the husband and the wife. You know why? Because if the husband dies, or if anything happens, at least the family survives. But look at the women farmers. Now, if the male farmer dies, the women farmer has nowhere to go to. Even you won't get Prime Minister's Kisan Nidhi. So the point is, we have to do a lot of legislative changes, and we are not, until I came to the parliament, when I was a bureaucrat, I used to think like this, that it could be done only through policy changes by, handling policy, making better policy, having greater collaboration, changing the mindset of people through a cultural, sensitization program, through getting the NGOs into it. But what is important, I think, is that let us review, I think, the Succession Act, the various acts, the various policies, and make those changes as well, because that would go on to probably also break the stereotypes to some extent. And then we have, everything has to go on simultaneously. One doesn't come after the other. So the cultural sensitization of the paterfamilias will also have to take place. You see, in many families, the women are actually the main breadwinners, and they are actually probably getting more money than the male member. But still the male is considered for decision making. He is vote final. That has to change. That has to change, and that can change both through a cultural intervention and through a legislative intervention. Traditionally, what has happened is that we have been having the male member decide in the family. I have been posted in Meghalaya. I have been posted in Kerala. I have seen the matriarchal systems. There the women member decide. I am not saying that the whole of India should be matriarchal, but I think that is to be balanced. And the governance, in the governance scheme of things, women have, it has to be, if you have that particular theme, then I think the solution would be there. That is, if governance in this country has to improve, governance is not just government, it's also private, everybody, then women have to have a central pole position. And that particular, once that recognition comes, everything would fall into place. And just for the record, I'm willing to collaborate on this with anyone who would like to take this up with me separately. Of course, Archana, we have been discussing with this. She's been a great support of the Gates Foundation, has been doing a lot of work in Orissa, and I have been in touch with them. Thank you.
Hey, if I may just come in for just half a minute, is that if that question, and Mr. Patnaik has so ably and so correctly answered it, but if one goes to the Mandeshi website or even goes to the links of what Chetna keeps explaining about Mandeshi, we will see in action what happens when communities and patriarchs are actually involved and when women are given pole positions and how that change happens. And Mandeshi is actually an example. For decades, they have been proving it. And then just open this report and go to page 75 and see 4 case studies there. What happens to brilliant girls when these things are not given to them? So both scenarios are there, and for anyone who wants to deliberate, there's actually a lot out there to understand this better. Thank you.
Last point, if I'm half a minute, I'll take. Yesterday in Kerala, the metro railway system in Kochi was just coming up. Who were the first people who were brought in to fly the metro train system? It was the women, and it was the transgenders. If you fly from Delhi to Trivandrum, there's a stopover at Kochi, you will find that it is the Kudumstri women who come and clean the aircraft. Their major work, which probably is the male domain, I have not seen it anywhere in India. Now that is what has to happen. The male has to cede space. The women, I'm not saying that the women have to grab it all the time. The men have to cede space. That is, only then the governance will improve. If your governance in the household improves, if the women is in a good position or a pole position, then the governance in the country can improve only when the women are in good position.
All right, I'm going to, I have to stop because I've overshot the time quite a bit on this discussion. But I want to thank our panelists for sharing your thoughts and helping us understand this, this entire challenge better. I want to thank the EDG Foundation for the work that you do on the ground and for this, for this report, like I said, which everyone is going to find, very helpful. Mr. Patnaik, thank you for giving, Dr. Patnaik, thank you for your time.
Thanks once again. Brilliant discussion. Thank you.
Handing this back to Surya. Surya, go ahead.
Thank you, Faye, for managing to derive so many thoughts and comments from our speakers in the 2 panels within this short period of time. Really appreciate it. We want to just sincerely thank each one of you for taking out time from your busy schedules to be present here today. It was an insightful and an engaging discussion. As you can see from the chat box, unfortunately, we couldn't take all the questions because of the paucity of time, but we did get some interesting, actionable thoughts that have emerged from today's conversations. We hope that this discussion was as stimulating for you as it was for us. We look forward to continuing our dialogue and engagement with all of you to advance the agenda of boosting women entrepreneurship in India. And we also hope to explore some of the collaboration and opportunities that we were talking about today's conversation with the Udyam Sri campaign to create an enabling environment for entrepreneurial women in the country. As mentioned earlier, the downloadable report of the launch that we did today will be available on the Edelgive Foundation website post this event. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us today. Have a great day ahead, and please take care and stay safe.